Hey, good afternoon. My name is Jeff Stutzman. I am the CEO of Trusted Internet. Trusted Internet is a managed security service provider and a virtual chief information security officer. So, what does that mean? Basically, think about ADT for your computers. So, we deploy next generation firewalls, endpoints, those kinds of things, and we monitor them 24/7. And we've mapped all these things over to government compliance, and we can work through your CMMC. But I want to just give you a little bit of an introduction to what we do. So this is a thing that I gave just before Christmas for New Hampshire Business Review. But basically, there's so many threats out there. You can't swing a dead cat without hitting somebody that's heard a story about a million passwords lost, or credit card scams, or business email scams, or ransomware, or whatever. So how does this happen? So I split my time. I've got a house and an office in southern New Hampshire, and I split my time between a place down in West Virginia because I do a lot of work in the DC area. But here's the thing, right? I did a trace route just as a quick demonstration to show I want to go to Amazon and I want my connection to be secure, and we're all trained to look for that little padlock. Here's what most people don't know. This trace route shows you all of the different nodes that your request to set up that secure connection will go through before it gets to Amazon. And so your connection won't actually be secured until it gets to Amazon. So between here, now this is the wireless in my house, and this is my internet security or internet service provider, TDS. So I'm going to go through TDS twice before I get to Amazon, and that's probably a load balancer or something like that. But I have to go through all of these servers before I can ever set up my encrypted session with Amazon. That means that along the way, there's all these computers that are monitoring the communications, probably for health of the network or routing or whatever it's going to be. But there are a lot of different places along this trip between my house and Amazon where my usernames and passwords can be picked up, or my IP address, or whatever, right? So there's probably a dozen stops and pass-throughs, so network devices, routers, firewalls, switches, whatever else, and computers, where things can get picked up. So at every one of these locations, they can get my IP address. Maybe it's geolocated to show where I am. They're going to get some browser information, and nothing is encrypted until I get to that final endpoint. Boy, that's embarrassing. Doing a quick demo, and I didn't have my phone on do not disturb, so I'm going to go just airplane mode for the duration. So now here's the problem, right? It gets messy fast. So of course, this is my home wireless, and this is where it converts over to my TDS connection. But I'm looking at Huffington Post and Amazon, and so you can see there are a lot of different places in here. And this is 5 clicks during the day. How many things do you click on or visit during the day where this is what happens? So along the way, there are millions of places for you to lose identity, credit card, home address, IP address, and all of these things become a bigger picture to make you a target for fraud, ransomware, malware, whatever. So typically I do a security 101. I'm not going to do it in this presentation because I'm just kind of giving you some use cases, but here's where we start. This is bad architecture. And we walk into so many places where we see an internet connection, a modem, an Ethernet cable, or an Ethernet cable connected to a wireless router, right? There's nothing in here that protects you. This is also what we see in many of the companies that we work with. We do a lot of CMMC work. We've done a ton of ransomware work, bunch of incident response. And when we walk in and we see this architecture, we immediately know that they're open. Now, in a company, this might not be a wireless. Maybe it's a router or a switch that's going to push out to subnetting for the rest of the company, but it's kind of the same thing. So here's why that's bad. So you got these things, this thing called a botnet, robot network, high speed, automated thing. Press a button, it's out there in the wild. It's like peeing in the pool. It's never coming back. It's going to infiltrate every single corner of that pool. And these botnets, once they're launched, they're going to infiltrate every single corner of the internet looking for things that they know how to break into. And when I say it's like peeing in the pool, you can never clean it out completely. It's always going to be out there. So there are tools that have been out there for 20 years that are still running around the internet looking for things that they know how to compromise. And this is one, right? So this Heartbleed attack has been out there since 2015, looking for vulnerable SSL connections in devices that use SSL for VPN or connectivity. But back to this. So the botnet, remote access Trojan. That means you're going to have access to that computer. I can do whatever I want on it, just like I was sitting in front of it. And Ghost is one of the original devices that the Chinese used to steal information from computers remotely. So this Ghost was a remote access Trojan that was turned into this high-speed automated robot network, botnet, in 2009. Still out there, still running through the internet. Blada Bindi does very similar things, except it steals credentials from your web browser. So if you're one of these people that stores your credentials in your web browser, Blada Bindi is out there getting it. And then Rotojakiro, this is one that I highlighted down here. This had been out for a while, but it resurfaced a couple of years back. This is actually a Vietnamese government-owned piece of code that they started to use in 2018 under the name Ocean Lotus. But this is going after Linux boxes. So if you've got industrial controls or you've got switches or things on the wall that are using embedded Linux, Rotojakiro is typically going to find them. Now in this case, you can see the yellow means that we're blocking it, but before we put the firewalls in, they weren't blocked, right? They were going straight through. So one of the questions that I always get is past performance. This is one, and the CEO loves to talk about what we did for his company. We call it Omega. This was a ransomware case. Company had been down for 4 days before we got the phone call. They were losing about $25 million a day in cash. They had a day or two left in their cash before they were facing an extinction event. This company had gotten hit with one of the early days of the big ransomware case, and so this is what you're looking at here. This is $100,000 in Bitcoin. We negotiated a ransom from 1.2 million down to 700,000. We paid it. They had stopped trading on the Nasdaq. The board needed to be involved. The FBI was watching. The CEO was in one of those positions where, what do I do? And I said, look, you're losing a lot of money per day. Let's pay the ransom and get you back into operation, which is what we did. So it turned out to be a $700,000 ransomware event. After we paid our last piece of it, of course, 3 hours later, we finally got the key. First one didn't work, so they put us into their help desk. We had operations restored in about 24 hours, except those things where the company had monkeyed with the data structures, and in that case, it just didn't work. We re-engineered their security architecture for them. We had it installed within about 30 days. Perfect timing, because that's when their insurance company wanted to come in and do an audit. And the insurance company came back and said that the architecture that we put in place to prevent a reinfection gave them one of the highest scores that they'd ever passed out. CEO loves to talk about what we did for him, and he's happy to provide references. This is a woman in a financial firm out in Orange County. She actually wrote a blog about what we did for her. But this was in her home, and she had this architecture down here that we've talked about being bad. They put a keystroke logger on her wireless, and so we were able to find it. We replaced it. We put a firewall in, but she had $82,000 stolen out of her bank accounts over the course of a 3-week period. That we were able to help her recover through an insurance claim, but she got hacked through this thing. Once they stole her usernames and passwords, they started stealing documents that she was touching online, and then they stole her telephone number and they ported it over from Verizon to Google. So now they could change the pins on her numbers and on her cards and do all of those things. So she's been a very loyal customer since 2019, and she tells everybody about us. This was another. Physical security cameras are one of the ways that that everybody gets compromised, and they typically don't think about it. But this is an example of a Nest camera, but there are so many out there. We typically, within the first 24 or 48 hours deployed on a network, one of the first things that we see compromised is a network video recorder or a camera system or an alarm system. So if I overwrite this router's code with a keystroke logger. Now, this is, showing Internet of Things in a house, but the same thing applies to a company, right? If I'm capturing usernames and passwords somehow, and they don't have two-factor authentication on the HVAC system, which is what happened with Target, then I can get into any one of these devices. So, we do a lot of work with CEOs in their homes. If you get hacked at work, you get hacked at home too. The idea here is that we need to figure out a way to better protect Internet of Things, as well as industrial controllers and those kinds of things, because a lot of them don't have two-factor authentication. The only way to do that is to proxy them out and put a barrier between those devices and the internet. Physical theft is a kind of a given, right? That doesn't necessarily play into the domain of the chief information security officer or the IT guy. But I had a friend of mine who was the CISO for a shipyard, and he used to say that he'd lose a third of his laptops just before Christmas every year until finally they put RFID on them and they were able to prevent that. But the other part of that is insider threat, right? From a digital perspective, not just a physical perspective. Who's watching what's going out? So 60% of cyber attacks are carried out by witting or unwitting insiders, right? So somebody gets hacked because they're not practicing safe cyber, they become an inside threat. IT people who are upset with the company, they're the most likely inside threat. So we have the ability to watch for all of those kinds of things as well. But this is what's going on right now, and ransomware is a really big deal. We've got APT-34, I think, in Crimea, Russian intelligence, hacking Ukrainian targets, right? So one of the easiest ways to get around sanctions is to use cryptocurrency. So why not deploy ransomware around the world? So here's the deal, right? And this was taken a couple of weeks ago. At the time, there were 1.6 million open computers showing up in Shodan. So all of these red clusters are open computers that are working normal web stuff, HTTP, unencrypted, HTTPS, right? So encrypted web, secure shell, domain name service, SNMP. These things are all available. What does available mean? Well, that means that I can get through to a remote desktop or I can get through to a webcam without really having to authenticate. Now, I've got to authenticate to get in through here, but the chances are if they're using this type of a service and they're making remote desktop available to the open internet, I already know that they're not practicing good cyber hygiene. High probability I'm going to get their credentials someplace else. I would be willing to bet most of them don't use two-factor authentication. So these are available computers. Now, here's the challenge. In the US, at the same time, there were 400 million of these computers available. So the question then becomes, how do you tell a botnet that this is a computer that you should not be attacking? We do that. It takes a little bit of sophistication, but that's what we do. But you can see this across the board, right? Big blobs in San Francisco, New York, Washington, D.C., Houston, Dallas, all the big places are represented. 73 million users using unencrypted web browsing. They're giving me their credentials. Of course, down here, modem web interface. That's an unencrypted default username and password for a cable modem. So this is how you get hacked, and we've got to be able to lock those down to keep it safe. It all happens because people don't know how to protect their network. They use very simple instructions in a very simple architecture. So let me take a minute and introduce myself and my team, and you'll know why you should listen to us when we talk about this. So I'm Jeff Stutzman, former Navy intelligence officer, but for 10 years before that, I was an enlisted communications guy with about half of that as a command line Unix administrator. So I got my degree, became a Navy intelligence officer, and I focused exclusively on information warfare, specifically in cyberspace. I've worked for Carnegie Mellon twice, once as a researcher, once as a principal engineer that they put on site at the DoD Cybercrime Center. But Navy intelligence, Cisco Systems out in California. Actually, I was based out of Massachusetts, but I was a global IT risk management guy, built out a lot of their supply chain practices. Went to work for Northrop Grumman after that as the chief information security officer for their electronics business, $7 billion sector, 35,000 employees over about 35 locations. But while I was there, I got a call from a friend of mine who said, "Hey, you might have a problem with some Chinese threat." And of course, everybody was having problems with Chinese threats at the time, espionage threats, advanced persistent threat. And so I built Northrop's team to go and find and drive out any espionage threats. So it was pretty cool. After Northrop, I went back to Carnegie Mellon for the second time, who put me on site at the DoD Cybercrime Center as their chief technologist. About 2 months into that, I got recruited to be the DICE director at the DoD Cybercrime Center. So the DICE, DoD DIB Collaborative Information Sharing Environment, an acronym that can only be made up by the DoD and only your mother could love you for. But what it was is defense contractors get hacked, are required to report into the DICE. And my team did the analysis on the back end to figure out how that happened and what we should do about it. And we would share that information back to the defense companies. Now, in my era, these were the big defense contractors that we were working with. Now they've got a whole bunch of others that are on board. The smaller ones are coming in. But what happened is I ran my own company until, starting in 2012 when I left the DICE. I've been running a company first as a cyber threat intelligence person. And then I realized a lot of these smaller companies out there, meaning like 1,000 people or less, have no idea what to do with cyber threat intelligence. So we opened Trusted Internet as an MSSP, and now we do it for you. So we can set you up as a SOC as a service. You can monitor your own SOC, and we can do the infrastructure, any of those kinds of things. But the way forward for me was building out an organization and a very smart team that just does this for you. And this is my team. First of all, I love hiring vets. They just get things done. So Mark Constantino is not a vet, but he's our director of IT. Mark did executive level, like help desk and IT services for Dartmouth Hitchcock Healthcare. And then I hired him out of a company called Convenient MD, which is a string of urgent care centers around the Northeast. LaShawn, she's project management for all of this stuff. LaShawn is right out of the Navy. She is a lieutenant, came out as a lieutenant. She's still a reservist. She is an information protection officer in the Navy. Nate Paddock and Roger Lett used to run the Air Force Security Operations Center, both retired lieutenant colonels. Paul Wagner is a retired E9 from the Army, and he is by day, he is the director of IT for the University of Arizona and also the chair for the cyber department out there. But Paul is a virtual chief information security officer for us. Derek came out of Bank of America as a risk management person. Prior to that, he was an information security officer for business unit in HP. Michelle, unfortunately, Michelle is getting ready to leave us, but she's been with us for the last couple of years. Michelle was Navy, and for 10 years prior to the coming with us, she was ISSM for CIA. And she had taken a job as the program chair for cyber at Cochise Community College, but she's moving on because I guess we wet her whistle. SOC director is Sajal Akram. Sajal came out of Pakistan Telecom. She's in Singapore now, and she is a mechanic. And then Jason heads up insider threat for us. Jason is a retired DEA intelligence agent and ran intelligence for G4S. So we focus exclusively on security, right? We don't call me when your printer's out of ink. I don't care. But if you think your print spooler has been hacked, that's when we jump in. Here's the difference between us and them. Most of our competitors hire right out of college. That's how they staff their SOC. These kids don't understand the nuance of IT. 83% of my people have master's degrees and 10 years experience in the big jobs, right? So we've been chief information security officers or directors of IT, but I believe that by hiring a senior team and using those senior guys to train some of the others, um, they understand the nuance of IT, and we can spot threats in a much better way. So we have a deep bench of large enterprise experience, a lot of diversity in the way that we approach it. Not everybody wants to deal with a blue collar guy from New Hampshire, so I've got people that you can talk to that are much nicer than me and maybe don't swear as much. Um, Professional certifications, this is kind of a requirement. So insurance companies like to see people who are working on their infrastructure be certified. And so I've got 9 certified information system security professionals. Those are largely our virtual CISO cadre. We've got 1 auditor. Actually, we've got 4 auditors on staff now. And then NSE 4, 5, and 6, and 7 are Fortinet certifications. 7 is like one of the highest you can get, enterprise architect. 5 is FortiAnalysis. 4 is the firewalls. So our watch is required to get certified. We go about it that way. So 4 years in a row, we've been listed as a top 250 MSSP. That's kind of a big deal. We have clients that run from 1 person to 3,500. So our oil and gas company is still with us. They divested a bunch of stuff over the last couple of years. In fact, they got acquired themselves, and we've been retained. That company is now 35,000 people, I believe. But that one business that we do is 3,500. We like to have them smaller, 500 or less. Key takeaways here. Number 1, we are in a heightened security threat for warfare hacktivists and sympathizers. Ransomware is the number 1 thing that we see. Business email compromise, physical security systems have been compromised all over the place. And then, of course, smart homes, IoT, and personal cybersecurity. Executives get hacked at home if they're getting hacked at work, and so do their kids and their family, because it might offer a way back into the company. Proactive is way better and way cheaper than reactive. So, I can't tell you how many people say to me, well, I've got insurance. Insurance gives you money, but it's not going to restore your data. It's not going to restore your burned out IT team. It's not going to give you, relief from the frustration, and it's not going to give you time. Your company is still going to hurt, but you're going to have a pocket full of money. Maybe, because the insurance companies are now auditing. Physical security systems are almost never cyber secure, but they're always targeted. Those botnets that are out there those are looking for camera systems now and network video recorders. And this is by far the number 1 place that we see compromised. Defense in depth doesn't have to be expensive to be effective, but it has to be good. So we use Fortinet products. We use some AI-driven tools. The idea is that we use really good tools. We get our people trained as far as we can in them, and that's what we focus on. So when it comes to security, that's our focus. Know your tools, right? This kind of goes back to that last point where it's us. I've shown you what our folks are certified to. Know the tools and how to fight your networks. And then, of course, have a plan. I mean, one of the first things that we'll want to do is to bring in an incident response plan and then potentially tabletop it with you. Those things go a long way. So what is this again? Bad architecture. What is this again? This is good architecture. And why? Well, automated threats never stop and can't be put back. Bad guys target networks without protection, and your basic internet protection or connection can't protect you from these things that are going over and over and over. So thank you very much for your time. Give us a call, trustedinternet.io. Stay safe online at trustedinternet.io.